where to start. I might go for this one here. So I'm originally from Edinburgh. I've been in Australia for 12 years now. Studied my undergrad and honours at Leeds Met, and really enjoyed the landscape out of the city in Yorkshire while I was there. And I completed my Masters at VCA 5 years ago now, and so it's sort of halfway through my time in Australia that I studied here. When I first came to Australia, I started looking at different forms of craft here and basketry here, and was very much influenced by completely different landscape, completely different plants and animals, and was very interested in Indigenous weaving practices as well. And I started to make quite small scale works. That's when I first started using irrigation piping and cable ties and nylon cord. And I came to these materials because I'd never seen hardware stores on the scale they are here. I could really see the connection between that do-it-yourself side of things and something that still seems to be connected to a pioneering or independent spirit, perhaps. So I started to explore my own perception of Australia through these materials, and gradually over time they went from being quite vessel-like or quite descriptive to much more complex forms, and now they're no longer descriptive of a particular landscape or a particular organic form. They're very much emergent within the process. So it got to a point where I had to start thinking about how to support the weaving if I wanted to make the works larger and increasingly complex. So I started weaving internal frameworks. That's part of what I started developing during my Masters at VCA. And these internal frameworks, they dictate the overall proportions of the work, and it's the point at which I work out the main practicalities of how the work is going to sit on the wall, how it's going to sit on the floor. But from that point on, it becomes almost an assault course for the weaving itself, and the weaving takes over from that point. So this piece, Envelopment, I made during my Masters, and it's the piece that really made a break for me from making descriptive forms into forms becoming increasingly more emergent from the process. So this is the point at which the weaving began to dictate what happened next. So this is the first time I made an internal framework, and I just remember beginning this piece. I think I actually started in the centre, and the way it began to emanate out from that central point was pretty exciting. It really felt like something new was happening, and it's pretty much set the direction for work since. Initially, I started running workshops pretty much as a way of earning a bit of income alongside art practice, and I started off with running workshops for children. But what's become really exciting in the last few years is that there are increasing crossovers between what I do in workshops and in my own sculpture making, and they become part of one cohesive practice. So it's very much looking at spatial relations and creating an awareness of spatial practice in sculpture. Also, the workshops are increasingly becoming a form of research for me, and they help keep your language in check, pretty much stop you becoming too much of a wanker. And it means that you have to be accountable about what you're doing and accountable to your concepts, because if you can't explain it to people and if you can't translate it in different ways without dumbing it down, it's kind of worth questioning what you're doing it for. So we're here at Nyora Studio Gallery, and this is the second workshop that I've run here. And we're really experimenting with a crossover between different forms of weaving, using very utilitarian materials, and using those very simple materials and techniques to explore quite complex ideas around space and spatial practice. And as you can see, everyone has now established their own little system in how they're working. This is the point where it's really fascinating that it's the same materials and variations on the same simple technique, but everyone's taken it in quite different directions. You can see that some pieces are on the verge of touching, but not quite there yet. We'll definitely be moving into that stage after lunch, and that's the bit where the real drama and the negotiation begins to happen. So we've gone from that initial sound of just the tape being used and pulled and stretched, and now there's as much conversation going on as there is making. There's a lot of logistics coming in terms of how each piece is going to meet. Also, people are talking about how their own little systems are meeting each other and whether they're going to change their pattern or their style in how they meet, or whether there's going to be a clash between them. So it's also becoming quite interesting in the variation of height that's involved too. Some people are beginning to spill out onto the floor, some are stretching out over towards the roof. So in a little while, once there's been more connections made, we'll come together and kind of stand back from the work, and that's the point at which we really need to work out how to unify it as a whole. But at this stage, those connections are just beginning to be made, and people are needing to really begin to work collaboratively and work with the visual language that they've all started to establish for themselves. I love the language involved is really interesting because it can be used in so many different disciplines, and how you can now relate what you've done back to your sculpture practice, drawing practice. Also just having that awareness of movement and space. Even when you're returning to creating a discrete object, you can think about how you're choreographing that movement in and around it and mixing up the rhythms. So it continues, it's something that people want to visit again and again and again. Well done. You're welcome.